Hi, my name is Katie and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be talking about the books that I want to read in the fall. Fall is my absolute favorite season of all time. Winter is a close second because I love the snow, but fall, the coziness, the changing of the leaves, oh, I love it. Like, I am the epitome of fall. Just pumpkins, apples, orange. I am not a big spooky reader. I love Halloween. I don't do scary. So a lot of these books aren't like in the horror genre, I would say. But I think I have like one or two horror books, or at least scary books in here. A lot of this is more fantasy based because for me, fall and winter is when I read the majority of my fantasy books because I just think it's the perfect time. Like, when else would you want to read a fantasy? So I have a bunch of books over here on the side that I want to read for the fall. I personally consider fall September to the end of November, and as soon as December 1st hits, which is my birthday, Christmas all around, okay? Christmas does not happen after Thanksgiving, it happens December 1st. As soon as December 1st hits, we're good. But I plan on reading these books until at least November, hopefully. My reading hasn't been great lately, so I hope to at least read some of these books. Okay, so the first book that I plan on reading in the fall, or I guess I don't want to say book, I guess series. So I've started the series and I never ended up finishing it because to me it gave more of a fall vibe, so that's why I want to read it in the fall. I actually read the first book in the summer, and that is the Raven Cycle series, Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. The first book is The Raven Boys, which I already read. The next one is The Dream Thieves, which I did not read. Then Blue Lily, Lily Blue. And then finally The Raven King. So I've only read the first one and I liked it. Was not in love with it. I think a lot of it I was a bit confused by, I would say. I don't know. I think if I read it, like when I reread it, I'll definitely love it more. I really want to love this series because everyone that I know loves this series. Like, Books and Lala loves it, Zoe loves it. Like, I don't know anyone who ever disliked this series. I even have the first one, Call Down the Hawk, I believe. I don't have my glasses on, so it's kind of hard to see. By Maggie Stiefvater, the first book in like the trilogy that I think it's like Rowan's trilogy, I don't know. But basically this book follows Blue, who her entire family is psychic, but she doesn't have the psychic abilities, I believe. She's more of she's like an amplifier, I guess you can say. But basically one day, Blue, ever since she was young, she's always been told that she will cause her first love to die. Then she meets the Raven Boys and a lot of stuff happens. There's Gansey, there's Adam, there's Ronan, and Noah. And Gansey is trying to find like this king. I read this a year ago and I really can't tell you what it's about, which is kind of sad. All I know is it gives off a lot of fall vibes, and I plan on rereading the first book, obviously, because I can't really tell you exactly what this book's about, and then continuing on with the next three. I like to marathon it, so as soon as I finish this one, continue on with the next couple books, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, so I'm very excited to reread this. The next trilogy I would like to read this fall is the Souls Trilogy by Deborah Harkness. The first book is A Discovery of Witches, and I've read this one. The next one is Shadow of Night. I did not read this one. And the last one is The Book of Life, which I did not read as well. Again, I read this in the summer. Probably should not have read it in the summer. Definitely should have read it in the fall and winter. It's a very like dense book. Like, it's a huge book with like itty bitty writing. So it took me a good amount of time to read it, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Again, a little confusing. So I definitely want to reread the first book before reading the next two. I want to read this probably in October because it's all about like vampires. Diana Bishop is a witch, but she tends to pretend that she's not a witch. She doesn't like to use her powers because she is very powerful and does not understand why. She's doing research in the Oxford Library where she comes across this manuscript that hasn't been seen in hundreds of years, and she's the only one that's been able to open this manuscript in the same amount of time. Like, no one's been able to open this manuscript. Because she found this manuscript, a bunch of different beings have come out to try and get this manuscript, but as soon as she sends it back, she can't find it again, basically. So out comes Matthew Claremont, a vampire, wants this manuscript. Like, he wants it. Their worlds intertwine, like, they fall in love, I believe. That's all I really remember about it. I know there's a bunch of side characters in here, a lot of witches and vampires and a lot of demons. So like, as soon as this book ends, the next book, Shadow of Night, starts. I believe I read like the first chapter or so, but I never ended up continuing. I don't know why, because I was really excited to read the next one, but I just never did. Oh, my dog just fell asleep. I'm very excited to finish this trilogy because I loved it, and I do plan on watching the TV adapted version of it. I just gotta find where to find it and how to watch it, because I know it's not like on Netflix or Hulu or something. I gotta see where it is. But that's kind of why I originally picked up this trilogy, is to watch the TV show. But I mean, a lot of people loved it, and I do love the books, but I'm very excited to continue on, hopefully. The next duology, or I guess the next two books that I plan on reading this fall, is The Crown's Game and The Crown's Fate by Evelyn Skye, I believe it's pronounced. The first book is The Crown's Game, and the next book is The Crown's Fate. I believe it is only a duology. I started this book a little while ago, a year or two ago, and I never ended up finishing it. I don't know why. I was very intrigued by the plot of it. I guess I ran out of time, I don't know. And then I just never picked it back up. So I want to reread the first one, at least the first couple chapters, because I just never finished it, and then continue on with the next one. But I believe this book takes place in Russia, with the Ottoman Empire and the Kazakhs. I don't know how to pronounce that. So basically, there is a crown's game, where it's basically two people are competing to become the Imperial Enchanter. The person who becomes the Imperial Enchanter works with the king, or the Tsar, I believe, and the other is killed. It follows Vika and Nikolai and Pasha have to compete in the game, and Nikolai is actually best friends with Pasha, who is the heir to the throne. So the two have to compete to become the Imperial Enchanter. I love anything based in Russia. I don't know if maybe I'll read this in the fall. I feel like this gives off a very fall wintry vibe, so I might read this more towards November, like as a good transition into winter. But the first couple chapters that I read, I absolutely loved, so I'm looking forward to hopefully finishing this duology. So the next three books I've already read, and that is A Darker Shade of Magic trilogy by V.E. Schwab. The first book is A Darker Shade of Magic, then A Gathering of Shadows, and A Conjuring of Light. I enjoyed this trilogy for the most part. I think I gave it either 4, 4.5, maybe 5. I think I liked the first book the most, the first and third. I don't know. I don't actually remember what I actually rated it. I enjoyed it. Basically, so there are 4 different Londons in 4 different worlds. There's White London, Red London, Grey London, and Black London. And in each of these different worlds, different things have happened. So in one of the Londons, there's magic and it's full of life. And that, I believe, is the Red London. Yes, Red London. There is Grey London, which has no magic and it's very dull and boring. White London has a lot of fighting and has lost control, basically. But there is magic, I believe. And in Black London, no one really knows exactly what has happened to. Kel, our main character, is one of the few people who are able to travel between the different Londons. So basically, he works for the king in Red London and is able to correspond the different Londons and pass on correspondences between the two kings or whatever. However, basically, Kel smuggles something from another London to his London, which is illegal, and it's not good for Red London. So he escapes to Grey London, where he meets Delilah Bard, and the two help each other. I enjoyed it. I didn't like Delilah. That was my main issue with the trilogy. I just could not relate to Delilah. Everything she did, it would be the opposite of anything that I would do. I feel like it was just, she was too much for me. I did enjoy every other character in here, so I do plan on rereading this because I do kind of miss the world. I do think this is a good November book. It's a good transition between fall and winter. So I highly recommend any books by V.E. Schwab, and yeah. So the next book that I plan on reading is actually a graphic novel, and it's called Witchy by Ariel Slamet Reyes. I'm totally butchering her name. I don't really know what this book is really about, but it's a graphic novel and it's very pretty. I got this in one of the Owl Crate boxes that I'm subscribed to. I believe it was the August one. The August one came with 2 books and this was one of them. Could have been July, but it has witchy, so I'm assuming it's about witches, and witches is fall, and that's why I'm gonna read it in the fall. The artwork looks really good. There's a map in here. So don't read many graphic novels. I do love them. I don't have a problem with them. I just don't normally read them, but I'm excited to try it. I probably wouldn't have picked it up on my own if it didn't come in the Owl Crate, so I'm excited to try it. The next one is also from an Owl Crate, and that is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. You might recognize this from the Netflix original series, Haunting of Hill House. Never seen it. I do plan on watching it this coming fall, as well as the second season that's coming out. I don't know what it's about, so I can't really tell you. Nothing really is on the back to explain it. It just says, no live organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality. So I don't know if this is like the entire book or if it's just like a section of it, but I know a bunch of, this was in the Owl Crate last year in September, like last September, and it's a penguin horror book. And there was a couple of different ones that you could have gotten, and this is the one that I got, and I'm very excited that I got this one because I do plan on watching the Netflix series because I haven't watched it yet, but I'm excited to give this a try. So I'm very hesitant to read it because I'm not a big horror reader, but I'm excited to try it out. Might as well continue with the Owl Crate. The next book I plan on reading this fall is The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd Jones. Basically, Rin is a 17-year-old who works as gravediggers in the remote village of Colburn, and the main problem is the dead doesn't always stay dead. The risen corpses are known as bone houses, and legend says that they're the result of an old corpse. When Elias, an apprentice map maker with a mysterious past, arrives in town, the bone houses attack with a new ferocity. So the two, Ellis and Ren, embark on a journey that will take them into the heart of the mountains, where they both face both the curse and the deeply buried truths of themselves. So it's another horror book. It's equal parts classic horror novel and the original fairy tale, The Bone Houses. I'll have you spell down for the very first page. So again, it's another horror book. So I'm very hesitant about this book as well because it's a horror. I hope to read it. I don't know if there's a sequel to next or if it's a standalone, but as I said, I got it in an Owl Crate. I probably would not have picked it up if it wasn't in the Owl Crate, so I'm very excited. I gotta start reading a lot of my Owl Crates. I've only read 2 of them, and I have a huge stack over there because I've been getting it since last year, and the first box was August, I believe. And I loved the first one that I loved the first book that I read, and then, sorry, they're over there. That's why I'm looking at it. And then the other book that I read wasn't good. Like, I DNF'd it. I'm hoping to like this book, and again, it's a horror, so I'm still very hesitant, but I'm very excited to read it. Here's my doggy. I don't know what he wants, but he says hello! Say hi, Miko! So the next book that I want to read this fall is Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. This is one of the most talked about books on BookTube and Book Twitter right now. The author, I believe, is the first transgender author to hit the New York Times best-selling list for a fiction book. So that's very exciting. Basically, I bought this because everyone was talking about it. It's basically Yadriel, I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, has summoned a ghost and now he can't get rid of him. Basically, it follows a transgender main character as he summons a ghost and now the ghost won't leave. Basically, Yadriel and Julian performed a ritual to basically find the ghost who murdered his cousin Miguel and set it free. However, instead of finding him, he summons Julian Diaz, this resident bad boy, and he is determined to find out how he died and tie up some loose ends. So the two of them work together to basically both get what they want. The longer Yadriel spends with Julian, the longer he wants him to stay. He doesn't want him to go back. So I'm very excited to read this book. I've heard nothing but good things so far, and this seems like the perfect book to read in October. So the next book I want to read is They Wish They Were Us by Jessica Goodman. Is it Goodman? Because the sticker is blocking it. Yes, it's Jessica Goodman. My cousin lent me this book. She got it at Target, obviously, and she enjoyed it. I believe she said it was a little bit predictable, I think. But it takes place on Long Island, which is where I'm actually from, and I don't believe I've read many books that take place on Long Island or even mentioned Long Island, so that's very exciting. That's one of the reasons why we both wanted to read this, is because it takes place on Long Island. So I'm excited to see exactly where on the island and if it's even accurate. But basically, honestly, I couldn't really tell you what it's about. I know it's a boarding school. Jill's best friend, Shayla, was killed by her boyfriend, but I think Jill doesn't believe that it was him. Honestly, it's pitched as Long Island, boarding school, and murder. So I'm excited to see how it all plays out. I think this is the only book. I believe it's a standalone. but don't quote me, I'm gonna look it up after. But my cousin enjoyed it, thought it could be better, so I'm excited to see how accurate Long Island is depicted in this, or if it's just used. So then the next book I want to read is Big Little Lies by Liane Moriarty. I'm pronouncing her name wrong, I apologize. Picked this book up mainly because I watched the first season of Big Little Lies with my mom on HBO and absolutely loved it. Didn't know that it was actually a book, so when I found out that it was a book, I just had to pick it up so I can read it to see how the adaptation was done. Follows a bunch of adults in their town, kind of like a rich town, like a rich beach town, I would say. And like basically at the end a murder happens. It says, sometimes it's the little lies that turn out to be the most lethal. A murder, a tragic accident, or just parents behaving badly. What's indisputable is that someone is dead. So I do know how it ends, but I don't know if it's different from the book, but I'm excited to read it. And it's mystery, there's murder, and I'm excited to read it. The next book I want to read this fall is Jade City by Fonda Lee. Again, I picked this up from Barnes & Noble because a bunch of people started reading it on BookTube and I've heard great reviews. It says, family is duty, magic is power, honor is everything. For centuries, honorable green bone warriors have used magical jade to enhance their abilities and defend the island of Kikon from foreign invasions. Now the war is over and a new generation vies for control of Kikon's bustling capital city. 4 siblings of the powerful Kawul family must prepare for battle, and the fragile peace between the clans is about to break. I believe jade is just very powerful, and it's used to enhance magical abilities. This girl on Bookstagram loved this book and is always recommending it. Ooh, and there's a map. We always love it when there's a map. So I'm excited to read this. I ended up picking up, I saw it at Barnes & Noble when I was browsing with my cousin and decided to pick it up and give it a try. I believe there's another book. I don't believe this, oh yeah. The second book is called Jade War and it's a red cover. So I'm excited to read this and experience it. The next book I plan on reading this fall is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. This is the 4th book that I'm mentioning that is V.E. Schwab. I believe this is the newer cover from the original book, but it's pitched as Victor and Eli started out as college roommates and now they hate each other. I think one of them ends up in jail and is leaving jail or something, but basically in their senior year, a shared research interest in adrenaline, near-death experiences, and seemingly supernatural events reveals an intriguing possibility that under the right conditions, someone can develop extraordinary abilities. But when their thesis moves from the academic to the experimental, things go horribly wrong. So, a lot of people love this duology. The second book is called Vengeful. I don't want to say that I'm hesitant to read this. I wasn't very intrigued to read it at first. When I first learned about V.E. Schwab and the books that she writes, it wasn't the first one that I would gravitate towards reading. And I don't know why. I kind of just put this to the back side of my brain of like, oh, I know what this book is, but I don't know if I'm interested in it. And then all of a sudden, everyone started reading it and absolutely loved it. I think it's because the cover change. I don't know. But basically it started getting talked about again, and I reread the synopsis and I was like, you know what? This seems kind of like right up my alley. Let me give it a try, see if I like it. If I do, I'll get the second book. But either you love it or you hate it. It's kind of, I believe, mixed reviews, but other people who love it, they love it. So excited to try it. Okay, the next book I want to read is The Lost by Natasha Preston. My cousin bought this book at Target, as you can tell, and only read half of it. She ended up getting too creeped out about it. But then it was actually on Wattpad. She ended up not finishing it because she ended up getting a little bit freaked out, got scared reading it, so she wants me to read it so I can tell her how it ends. Basically, in Piper's hometown, teenagers keep disappearing and everyone assumes they're just runaways. But when yet another person vanishes, Piper and her best friend Hazel suspect something more sinister is going on. So they decide to investigate, determined to learn the truth. Their search for answers leads them to the source of the missing people and their captors. Piper and Hazel suddenly find themselves locked away in a secluded building in the middle of a privately owned forest. But the building isn't only meant to keep them imprisoned, every room is a test to see if they can make it out alive, and failure means being lost forever. So basically, how I see it is, if you remember the Pretty Little Liars episode, where the girls are kidnapped by A and they're put in separate rooms, and they kind of have to try and escape, and then there's a Criminal Minds episode where a bus full of students is taken and are basically pinned against each other, and the only way to leave is to kill the other students. You get chosen, like each person chose like a team and are pinned against each other. That's how it seems to be described to me, and it's kind of like a game type of thing. So I'm very excited to actually read this. It sounds just up my alley, and I hope to read it soon so I can explain to her what the book is and how it ends. and if it's scary or not. So the next book that I want to read this fall is called Labyrinth by Catherine Coulter. This was again on the buy one get one 50% off table. When I went with my cousin, we both found one book and then we split the price because we never find two books that we want to read there for each other. So basically, Agent Sherlock, kind of a stupid name, is driving in downtown Washington when her Volvo is suddenly T-boned at an intersection. When she finally regains consciousness, she's in the hospital. She's told about the accident and the man she struck. No one knows who he is or where he is because he ran away. From DNA, they discover his name is Justice Cummings and he's a CIA analyst at Langley and he's still missing. Meanwhile, in the small town of Virginia, Special Agent Griffin Hammersmith rescues Carson De Silva, a kidnapped woman claiming her captor had probably murdered 3 missing teenagers. However, the man she accuses is the local sheriff's nephew and a member of a very powerful family, reputed to have special powers. When the sheriff arrests Griffin and Carson, Griffin calls Agent Savage for help. Together they have to weave their way through a labyrinth of lies to find the truth about a terrible secret. So it sounds very interesting. It's like 2 stories are going to be interwoven with one, especially since one of them is a CIA agent and he disappeared. I think the name Agent Sherlock is a bit tacky, but I didn't write the book. So I'm excited to read this. It seems very good. I love mysteries, and it's a chunky one. So I don't know, I'm picking it up on a whim, and it just sounds really good. So hopefully it is. Okay, the last 2 books that I plan on reading this fall is The Beautiful and the Damned by Renee Ahdieh. First one is The Beautiful, and obviously the next one is The Damned. I don't know how many books this series plans on being, but I'm excited to read it. Basically, it follows Celine Rousseau, and it takes place in New Orleans. There's vampires, there's a Sebastian, there's murders. So honestly, vampires, murder, New Orleans, 1800s, you have to love. So I'm very excited to hopefully read this. I know the first book got a lot of bad rep because it was pitched as the next vampire book, and the vampires don't actually come out in this book, I believe. I believe it comes out in this one. So honestly, I kind of like this cover better, and look how pretty that purple is. But I'm excited to read the 2. I hope to like it because I have both of them. It's one of my most anticipated books, so hopefully I like it. I don't know. Guess we'll have to see. I'm excited. So those are all the books that I plan on reading in this fall. If you've read any of these books, let me know down below which one I should start with, because I honestly don't know which one I'm going to start with because there's just so many. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye!